It's the Underpowered Hour. On this week's show, we're joined by Ivan and Dan from Rovertalk for our yearly Land Rover market recap. What happened and what are we looking forward to? And now, here's the show. Welcome to the Underpowered Hour. I'm Steve Barris, mild-mannered television executive by day and Land Rover collector by night. You can find out more about our cars and what we're working on at thebarriscollection.com or follow us on Instagram at thebarriscollection. I'm joined, as always, by my good friend, Ike Goss.
Thank you to everyone joining us today. I'm the RAF Blue to Steven's Tasman Blue. I'm the dated but familiar host of podcasting, Ike Goss. I own and operate Pangolin 4x4 in Springfield, Oregon, where we live and breathe Land Rovers. Check us out online on Facebook, Instagram at Pangolin 4x4. Let's get started.
All right, Ike. Well, we're back. It's the new year. All is, all is well. All is exciting. The world is once again our oyster. Everything that happened last year is forgotten and forgiven, I believe.
My memory has been erased, and all things will be better and brighter.
What is behind us does not matter.
Yeah. All the political strife and instability past year, gone.
Done. Yeah, we've completely forgotten about it. It's all good. Yeah. Any New Year's resolutions that you came out with on your vision quest out in the desert?
We got to do a podcast about our vision quest in the desert.
We are, yeah. We're going to do a winter breakdown here.
That's an important resolution that just came to me. Mm-hmm. And then, one of my resolutions is to buy more Land Rovers. I think that's what I'm excited about.
Interesting. I think one of Liza's resolutions was to seriously stop me from buying more Land Rovers this year. It was a dismal failure last year.
Oh, yeah, that is actually one of my my other resolutions is to convince you to purchase more Land Rovers.
Yeah. It doesn't take much convincing.
I did see a really cool Series 1 pickup for sale.
Ooh, I want a Series 1 pickup so bad.
I know you do. I know you do.
List.
It's so good. It's so good. Oh my gosh. I'll send you some pictures of it. Right, and it's Canadian.
Oh, that makes it worth everything. I mean,
and it's especially early, and it has a really interesting color combination with the gray body and the blue chassis. 1 year only.
I do love that. 1 year only.
Yeah,
that is well, there you go.
Okay. So you can tell I'm working on my resolutions.
It's 3 days into the year, and we're already buying another shitty old Land Rover. So there you go. Well, with that, speaking of buying and selling shitty old Land Rovers, today is a tradition. This is this is something we do every year now. We've done it for 2 years, so it's every year. We have our very, very good friends, Dan and Ivan from Rovertalk, a podcast that we love to listen to. And they are, sort of experts in the market of online auctions and things like that. Bring a trailer, cars and bids, stuff like that. They're buying and selling and commenting and things all the time about Land Rovers that are up there. And we've gathered a list of some of our favorite Land Rovers that have sold or have been purchased or maybe came across these websites in the last year. We didn't have anything quite as exciting as that wooden picket Range Rover that was there last year. I really want that. It's still here in town somewhere. It's in Los Angeles somewhere. I kind of really want it. It's so weird.
If you're listening and you know the location of the wooden picket Land Rover, I will pay a finder's fee if you can convince Steven to purchase it.
It's like the Neil Diamond of Range Rovers. just so weird. So
gauche. When you put it like that, it sounds really good.
Yeah, it is. It's fantastic. I think if you drive it through certain parts of Los Angeles, middle-aged women throw their underwear inside of it, just like Neil Diamond. It's great. Yep. Well, with that, let's head on over to the international podcast conversation lounge and have a little chat with our good friends Dan and Ivan about what happened in the market in
All right.
23.
Let's take a saunter over there.
All right. Well, it's that time of the new year. What better way to start the new year but to look back at 2023 with our very good friends from Rovertalk, Dan and Ivan. Welcome back. We were just saying that we do this every year. We need to do this like quarterly because I enjoy chatting with you guys immensely, but there is an awful lot of Land Rovers that get sold every year, and it's a lot of work to go back and look at them all. But guys, welcome back. Thank you for joining us again. I am thrilled that this has become a yearly tradition.
We are as well.
Thank you for having us.
And for those listeners who I don't know who would be listening to the show and don't listen to Rovertalk, but Dan and Ivan host a fabulous podcast of which I am a longtime listener, first-time caller, called Rovertalk, which you guys do spend a fair amount of time, not all the time, but a fair amount of time talking about the Land Rover market. What's for sale, what's sold, what's selling. Ivan, you are involved in selling quite a few vehicles every year. And Dan, you are obviously very hip to the world of Bring a Trailer and Cars and Bids and all those sort of things. You're very active in that community. So that's what brings us together today, is to sort of look back at that market with the Land Rover market experts and, you know, sort of see what piqued your interest. What did you think was interesting this year? So Ivan, maybe we'll start with you. What was your car of 2023? What did you think was the Land Rover that for whatever reason interested you in the market?
Well, as you know, because you have too, I had the opportunity to visit the Dunsfold collection. I think when did I go? Was it over the summer?
No.
It was November.
November, yeah.
Anyway, unbelievable collection. And not to get into it, because that could have us talking here for like an extra 3 or 4 or 17 hours.
Yeah.
But I actually picked a car that wasn't like technically for sale, but I saw it on Bring a Trailer, which is one of the Land Rover Centaur half-track trucks.
Yes. Yeah.
And that is for those of you that are clearly not seeing it, it is actually I guess we could call it a Series 3 109. And the rear has been adapted to hold tank track.
Yeah.
So it's technically a tank.
Yeah.
The one that I saw on Bring a Trailer, which was just a listing. I mean, from even though it was from a while ago.
Yeah.
That was clearly my favorite car because it's just so cool.
Yeah.
Now, when you speak to Phil at the collection, you realize it's utterly ridiculous and useless.
Yeah. Yeah. Like
But
it doesn't work at all. It's completely impractical, but super cool looking.
It's super cool looking, and they have one there. And and honestly, that was just one of my absolute favorite cars that I saw this year. Now, it might not be new for everybody, but I would have to say if there was a car that I was just shocked about, it was that one.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Those are really interesting cars until you have to turn. Yeah, like if something's over to your left or possibly over to your right, and you'd like to drive the vehicle to those locations. No.
How is it that you manage a turn? Actually, now that I think about it, how do you? I mean, you have is it skid steer on the back?
You sound just like the people who are evaluating these for the military. You're
right, exactly. Yeah.
Wait a minute. Why do we need this front part of a car that's welded onto the tank? Why don't we just have the tank?
Tank. Yeah, for those who haven't seen the half track, and other companies for some reason made them. Now, maybe some research needs to be done into half tracks. They're just like you said. They're like a Centaur. They're like horse on the back, person on the front. Their car on the front, tank on the back. Yeah,
it's a reverse Centaur. It's like
Centaur.
The bottom half of a man and the top half of a horse. It's like the worst possible combination.
The worst.
It's like a mullet.
Yeah.
It's like a mullet. Is this in the front? I'll work in the back.
It is going crazy out there. Yeah, they are awesome. I agree. I want to say it was Willys maybe made a half track, or there is definitely a World War II era U.S. military half track too. But no.
Yeah, there is. It's the white.
The
white company built
the
them.
White company half track. That's right. And how did they turn? That's a great question. Is there some combination of skid steer and traditional steering? How do you?
No, it just takes a really long way to do it.
It just turns incredibly slowly.
It just keeps going.
You load the car with soldiers, and when you have to turn, just stop and have them push it.
Have them push it into a circle. Well, There you go. Well,
So
that great choice. Great
Yeah.
choice. I mean, I think anytime you have a Land Rover with tank treads on it, there was a Cuthbertson converted Land Rover that came up for sale in the UK. I don't know if it was this year, might have been last year, or maybe even the year before. It was in the past. And I really did think about it. It is pretty cool, but they're super not road legal and they're incredibly slow. And I don't know, they don't fit in a container. There's there's a number of reasons that they're stupid.
So why didn't you buy it?
Yeah, I mean, I know, right? It seems like, I do kind of think about tank tread converting a Freelander every once in a while.
The Land Rover fire engine is a gateway drug to the Land Rover tracked vehicle.
To tracked vehicles.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. It's true. It's the, it really is. It really is. Yeah, it's the
happen.
recreational marijuana of stupid Land Rovers. It's exactly right. Republicans are right. It's a gateway. That's right. You can't just dabble. You can't dabble. Well, that's great. And Ike, what about you? What's one of the cars that you saw across the block this year that you were really enamored with?
It was actually one that came up for sale recently that was pretty interesting. It was a 1957 107 station wagon for sale in Africa. And it was notable. They did use a lot of 107 wagons in Africa. That was kind of the classic safari period with the British going to Africa, and they took their vehicles with them, and to do that they brought a lot of 107 wagons, which were largely destroyed, using them as buses and then overloading them and driving them on crappy roads and that sort of thing. So this particular vehicle had survived. And what was kind of notable about it is it had all these period safari modifications to it. And it was super crazy and Mad Max. It had a lot of expanded sheet metal over the windows, and it had auxiliary lighting that was built into the fenders, and toolboxes and water tanks and hammock holders and awnings and all this stuff that you would associate with like taking a long extended trip.
Yeah.
And it was all built, back in the 50s and early 60s. And it was largely untouched from that period.
Oh,
so
cool.
it was pretty cool because it was totally unrestored. It just looked like a time capsule, but it was this crazy like Mad Max, touring car. So I thought that one was really a neat car. It sold at a local auction. I'm a member of this WhatsApp group, which is basically old dudes in Africa with Series 1s.
Yeah,
and it came
Who isn't
up
a
on
member
there.
of that group, Yeah.
I mean, everybody who's anybody is on there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Lewis Powell is on there, who's like, if you ever read the LRO magazines from the 90s, Lewis was like doing all these expeditions in Series 1s, 80 inches and 107 wagons and stuff over the Sani Pass and in Lesotho and these places. So he's on there. And so he's super fun to talk to, a fountain of knowledge about various places to travel and also Land Rovers. So we discussed that vehicle, and that was a super interesting one that came up for sale. And that was only within the last month or so, but I thought it was a neat car.
That's awesome. I love those kind of cars that come with all of their original shit, as weird as it is. I think Dormobiles are great. Speaking of cars that were purchased this year by Linus, Dormobiles are just full of like their little weird bits of like people have modified the cabinets and the upholstery and it's just like, man, it's like a time capsule. It's like a little portrait of the person that used that car and all the things that they did in it and stuff. So no, I agree. It's pretty cool.
This is pretty neat. And this is before Dormobile. So like it's all that same sort of stuff that you would want in a traveling car, some sort of thing to sleep in, some sort of thing to store food in or cook food, a stove, a sink, a bed, all these things. But it had to be all homemade at that time before Dormobile. So it was kind of neat. It was really pretty interesting.
The Dormobiles are especially good when you notice the hand of the period wife. Because then it's got like some really stellar curtains in there and like some hand towels that match the curtains. And if you put that all into like the box of a 109, it's like It's like, does it? It's like, I don't want it restored. I want that.
Yeah.
I want that lady's towels and curtains.
Yeah, it is cool. It is like your grandma's house on wheels, which is, it's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
They were kind of fun, Dormobiles. They had some fun finishes. If you look at the ones, especially the early 60s ones, they kind of get blander as time goes by. Like the original ones were, the elephant hide seating with white piping, and then they had curtains with a pattern on it. The awning had a candy stripe on it. That was really cool, and the bunks were plaid. And so they had all these like kind of interesting patterns that were incorporated in it. The table had like a pattern for mica, like a 60s pattern that was pretty interesting.
Like
they're very mid-century, and they're colorful, and they're approachable, and they're happy and fun.
They are.
And I feel like that gets lost later. Like if you go buy something like a camping accessory for a Land Rover today, some sort of like alu cab, some sort of like accessory like that, it's either very tactical or just like super beige or super gray or super, it's really boring. And so that stuff of that period is far more interesting to me, because it's like, it's got some personality, like it's not just like a beige or tan or gray monolith.
Certainly, like campers of today, like all have like a NATO rail down the side and mount a scope to or something. Like I don't know who's mounting rocket launchers to the outside of their tow behind trailers, but it certainly does seem that way. Yeah, it certainly. This is a good point. It's a good point.
How aggressively can we camp?
Yeah, like with real purpose.
Maybe they're plumbers or electricians during the day, that they have that tubing on the side, and then
they're really
off-road on the week.
That's exactly right. Yeah, they're really ready to go. Dan, how about you? I feel like you and I have similar tastes when it comes to odd vehicles out in the market. We were saying before, there unfortunately no wooden picket Range Rover for sale this year.
You just said fire truck, just literally a few minutes, and that was one of them that I had kind of picked out that I really would have loved to have gone and seen and actually own, but it was out of Germany. It was on Bring a Trailer in August. I don't know if you remember seeing it, but it was a 68 Ford Control.
Oh,
with a pop
yes.
top.
I think I remember that. Right.
And it only got to like 9,000. And for the life of me, couldn't figure out why there was really no interest in it. But it was really amazing being a Ford Control with a pop top. Still had pretty much all the apparatus with it. They rarely come up on Bring a Trailer. You can get them overseas here and there, but to have a 2.6 come up on Bring a Trailer, I thought was pretty rare.
It is, yeah. And certainly, I mean, Ford Controls, generally speaking, are acquired taste, to say the very least, but the fire appliance version, and there were lots of both 2Bs and 101s that were ultimately used as fire appliances. But yeah, I didn't see that one on Bring a Trailer, but that's awesome. The fire trucks are, once you start, it's hard to stop. You kind of get into this rhythm. You can't just have one, you need a small fire department. So
you never know when there's going to be a fire to put out.
It's true. Yeah. I've yet to actually fill the tank in mine yet, but I have the instructions now to do it. And at one of these weekends,
what are you going to fill it with?
Yeah, just exactly. Lube. I'm gonna head over to the local fire station and see if the boys will help me fill up the tank. It's apparently because John Luke in the UK, good friend of the show, he also has a Firefly, and he said apparently it's easy to do something wrong with the tank and it'll split. You can overpressurize. You can also pull a vacuum in it, apparently, very easily. And so you have to make sure all the valves are in the right order and everything so that you don't split it open. But yeah, apparently, it's super fun to fill it up with water and then just go hose down kids in the neighborhood. It's give it a go.
What do the authorities have the same type of kind of dislike for when like people imitate police cars?
I don't
No.
think anyone in the world would think this is like an active fire. That
So
Yeah.
if let's say your house is on fire, and then like somebody showed up with a fire appliance and started putting it out, would you care if they
Yeah, I
were
don't
like
think
a
the
licensed
same.
fireman?
yeah.
Well, if I were asked what I consider roadworthy, I think I might be kicked out.
Yeah, right. You
Just
can
basically, I'd be like, yeah, absolutely. Drive that. Absolutely.
drive it. Yeah.
What's
do
the
it.
what's the worst thing that you've ever driven the longest distance?
It's a good question.
Oh my God. One time when I lived in Spain, and this must have been, oh, you're going to be surprised about this. This must have been, I'm thinking early 2000s.
Okay.
And my father had a BMW 524 turbo diesel whose engine just died.
Mhm.
And for some reason, I don't know why I didn't have a car, which is rather odd.
Mhm.
And so all of a sudden, the both of us, which at that point in time, we both lived in Spain, we were living together, we didn't have a car. So my father says, oh, don't worry. One of the secretaries in my office is going to lend us a car.
Okay. Seems
I didn't
reasonable.
say anything.
Yeah,
I was like,
right,
oh,
yeah.
good.
Yeah.
What is it? It is a second generation. So this is not the classic Fiat Cinquecento.
Oh,
Well,
You know the
nice.
one that-
Yeah.
Like the 90s, that was like a little plastic box.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. That must have had like a 700 cc engine or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. It was like a
that.
motorcycle engine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was, and it wasn't the classic one. It wasn't like the pretty looking rounded one. This was literally it was like a bad shoebox.
Mm.
Well, so clearly I wanted to take my girlfriend out somewhere. I was like, oh yeah, I got this car.
Right.
This
And
will
I get
impress her.
into it.
This.
And the pedals are so close to each other that I'm like, okay, what? So finally I had to like take my shoes off because literally you've got
Mhm.
clutch,
Mhm.
like the clutch and the brake are like a centimeter apart
Yeah.
from each other.
Yeah.
So so I had to drive that for an entire weekend.
Mhm.
And my father clearly was smarter than I. He's like, oh no, drive me around. And I was like, really? You don't want to drive? He's like, oh no, don't worry. I've had a drink. Why don't you drive? It's the worst thing I've ever driven in my life. When you went past 50 kilometers an hour,
Mhm.
the car would start doing like this.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I don't know why.
So
I can't
was by
explain why.
design.
Was
It was designed for
Well,
that.
yeah, was there anything wrong with this car, or was it just a bad
It was
car?
just a bad car.
It was just
Yeah, it was
because
just
the
a bad
thing
car.
is, I remember thinking, wow, like getting into it from the outside, it was like, okay, this looks kind of weird, but it's okay. And I looked at it, I had like 50,000 kilometers, which is a lot for a Fiat. But even then,
Mhm.
I thought, and
That's
it
the worst
wasn't
that could
that.
happen,
oh, it
you
was-
know?
So somebody previous to you drove it even farther.
Somebody
Theoretically.
had to go
Yeah,
for that.
theoretically, yeah. Yeah.
Somebody was really cheap. They're like, oh, I'm going to buy this because you get like 50 miles. to the
Yeah,
gallon.
exactly. Yeah.
Ew.
Yeah. You go to the gas station 3 times a year. I once had to move a 1976 GNC motorhome from the middle of Florida to Orlando, Florida. The engine was in such bad shape, took most of the day to get it running. There was no way to like tow it. It's too big, right? Like it's just too giant. Like the tow truck, or there's no flatbedding it or anything. It would have been so expensive to have it moved that it was kind of like not an option for this particular project. And so the engine is like inside the cab, right? It's like a cab over design, forward control
Mhm.
sort of design. So we got it kind of running. There was no gas in it at all. Like I got it running with a Sprite bottle into the carburetor, enough to like get it to the gas station where we couldn't shut it off, because I was pretty confident if we shut it off, we wouldn't really get it going again. It was basically just running on starting fluid. So we filled it while it was running. And then as we were going down the like Florida Turnpike, we had the cover off of it and would just all the windows open so that we didn't die, and the cover off of it. And as it started to sort of bog down, we would just hit the carburetor with a little bit more starting fluid to kind of get it back up to rev so it'd keep going. And we got, this was maybe a 150-mile trip we had to take this stupid thing. Doing this, like we went through like I think 3 cans of starting fluid. And then we're almost there. We're like a mile, 2 miles maybe from this the place that we're going to drop it off, where it's going to get stored for a little while. All of the lights go off inexplicably, like for no reason. Like every electric system in the car just shuts off. It's still driving somehow. The guys that I'm with, Leslie gets his phone out the window with the flashlight on so that we could like just barely make out. And we're in like very rural, swampy Florida where you could just barely make out the road by like the moonlight. And we go over a bump and like all the lights turn back on just in time to find our turn and sort of skid in there. Like, I don't know how much damage we did to that engine by getting it there that way, but it really didn't ever have to like drive in a significant way again. It was getting completely restored from there. So it was okay. But that was probably the longest, sketchiest trip. Yeah.
You're 100% positive it was just a bump that you ran over, right?
There's no way to know. That's what we're going with,
Okay.
but there's no way to know, Dan. There's no way to know. Yeah. No one was reported missing or anything, so we would think we're probably clear. Might have been a gator or something, but we were like one step away from the, the Fury Road guy just like, spitting gasoline into the intake of the motor of a car. We were just one step below that. I did have the things that I needed to rig up like a ball pump out of a jerry can directly into the motor if I needed to, because we thought maybe the fuel pump was just totally gone. As it turns out, it just was running, gasoline had sat in there forever. And, we did all the things we could do on the side, literally like out the front of some guy's house in Florida. We did everything we could do there with like hand tools we bought at Harbor Freight after I got off the airplane in Orlando on the way to get this thing. But yeah, that was probably the sketchiest in the way that at any moment many of those things could have exploded or one of us could have fallen out of the bottom of the car onto the road or any of that sort of stuff. I think maybe, I don't know. There's it's probably there's other sketchier airplane stuff, but I think that's the sketchiest car one.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
One time, sometimes the sketchiest ones are not always the ones that you drive the longest distance. One time I drove 300 miles in a Series 1 vehicle that had no brakes and no parking brake. And but I think the sketchiest one was I drove 20 miles with somebody on the fender acting as a carburetor, pouring gas in the engine. You're dumb. You want to go.
Yep.
You want to go
Yep.
someplace, and like
Yep.
that's what you do. But
Yep.
you're like, I probably wouldn't do that again. So who's left? We got some more vehicles.
Ike and I talked about this one on a show a little while ago. This was an auction that was just very recent. Bring a trailer here, just at the beginning of December. It was a Santana. So I know you're a big Santana fan. A Series 2A. It's an 88-inch, not a particularly remarkable model, but it sold for $68,000. And I mean, it's fine. It's like a nice car, sort of. I mean, there's a few opportunities for, painting over rust and lots of missing pieces and incorrect pieces and things like that, which is all fine. I mean, it looks like a fun car to drive, but for $68,000, one would assume, a higher.
Someone had to have been completely drunk.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
it just doesn't make a ton of sense. I mean, I guess, hey, the heart wants what the heart wants, but yeah, it just seemed to me like, wow, that is a healthy amount of money to pay for that kind of a vehicle.
Maybe they really loved that huge sticker on the doors or something.
The Land Rover sticker on the door, yeah.
Maybe it was like a money laundering situation.
Could
Who
be,
knows?
yeah.
Yeah.
It could be. Yeah, it's just an interesting yeah.
Rick, I don't want to be suspicious here, but every time I see a market anomaly of this,
Mm-hmm.
I kind of look at the bidders and I'm like, okay, what do these people actually bid on?
Right.
Right? 'Cause
Right.
I don't want to kind of be that guy, but
It does beg the question,
I actually looked at that, and that person had previously bid on some other Land Rover Series trucks.
And yeah, some of the other bidders were like several years into Bring a Trailer. And like, I just think it was, you had two people that were sipping juice and
Right.
were like,
It seems like a
just
great idea.
very competitive. And
Yeah.
someone
If
wanted it,
they're
and,
happy
good
with
for
it,
the
more power
seller.
to them.
Yeah, good for the seller if they actually got paid and
Yeah, for
and
sure.
move forward from.
It looks like a pretty good, like 5 feet away truck. The paint's okay. if it runs well, I haven't watched any videos or anything, but if it runs well and stuff, it's got what seems like some reasonable rust on the chassis and some stuff like that, but nothing that's like, unsafe. We've certainly seen some extraordinarily unsafe Land Rovers this year, not necessarily for sale, but, there are worse things out there. But yeah, it was just interesting to see that. And then the bonus one for me on the Bring a Trailer side is the 2003 37,000 mile Freelander SE3. Yellow one, beautiful yellow SE3, which is of course the 3-door version, if you will, 2 doors and a plastic camping.
I put a bid on that.
Did you? Yeah.
Yeah, but you could tell that it was toast from the usual areas on the Freelander.
Yeah, the important thing that you want to look at when inspecting one of those, is actually on the front, where if it says Freelander, you know that it's pretty fucked.
It's going to be fucked. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Generally speaking, the area you want to inspect is the entire car because it's probably all screwed up. But
basically,
it's $10,000 for. Listen, I have a Freelander that I've spent $10,000 on. I bought it for like about $500. And so that gives you a sense of how expensive it is to make a working Freelander. Yeah. It's a great looking car. I love the 3-door. There will be a time where I want one. But I think the even more remarkable thing is over on Cars and Bids. There was a 2005 Freelander SE3 that, it was fine, relatively high mile, 93,000 miles, which is actually kind of exciting for a Freelander. That's a lot of miles if it's still running. But one owner, a single owner until 2023, the same Freelander somebody put 93,000 miles on their Freelander. At that point, I wouldn't sell. At that point, I think that's a family heirloom. You need to keep that.
You'd be buried with that car.
You should be buried in that car. I'm surprised that car wasn't the reason for your burial, but it's pretty impressive. It's pretty impressive to imagine a one owner Freelander. I don't know.
I know. Did nobody in the comments ask what were you possessed by to hold on to this car for such a long time?
Why? And it's in remarkably good condition. I think if I were to purchase a Freelander for any amount of actual money, which is extraordinarily unlikely, it would probably be that one. It was in Texas. It went for $7,000. So it wasn't yellow, and the yellow one is kind of cute, but it was silver. But it was in incredibly good shape, 93,000 miles. So everything on it would be broken, I imagine, from a drivetrain standpoint, but and irreplaceable as well, because there's no replacement parts for them. But it looks good, and single owner.
You get an idea of who's bidding on these cars when you read a little bit of the comments. So here's a comment that says, is there a major crease tear in the driver's seat? All of the pictures conveniently do not show it. Would like to know how bad it is. Nothing in the floss section. When that's your concern about a Freelander, you're a newbie.
Yeah.
You're not the person who should be buying.
You don't buy that Freelander. Yeah. The condition of the upholstery is really not where you're, it's true.
I had an interesting scenario this year with one auction. So during the Thanksgiving auction, off a P38 with a manual, 4.0 with R3.
I remember. Yeah, that is super cool.
And in my opinion, it bombed, which it ended up bombing. But anyway, so the highest bidder didn't reach reserve. So the highest bidder calls me. He's, oh yeah, tell me about the car. And after a little bit, he's like, yeah, I've never actually owned a Land Rover. I don't know anything about cars. And immediately at that point, I'm just like, well, this might not be the car.
Probably not the car
for you. I'm just saying, but it's really cool. I'm like, yeah, but you have you got on the forums and researched Range Rover P38? He's like, no. I'm like, well, why don't we do this? I'm happy to sell it, but why don't you just do a little bit of research before?
Spend some time.
I won't sell it to anybody else, but please do that before. And then if you're sure about it, I'm happy. And not only that, but he was going to drive it cross country. So he wanted to fly and pick it up in Chicago and drive it back to Colorado.
Nice.
Because he fully intended to use it in his house in Colorado in the mountains for which I said, well, again,
Yeah.
maybe just a bit early. Man,
Yeah.
This is really a car that you just kind of look at. It's not really a car for driving.
Occasional used car. Not really.
If a car was a waxed fruit, this would be the car. You don't really kind of put it in your garage and look at it.
Yeah, it's great.
You know, when people call you and they ask you, would you have any hesitation driving across country? And when they say it seriously, and you're like, okay, where do I start?
Yeah. Well, it depends on the person. I wouldn't. But,
are you coming with tools, or should we meet at Home Depot?
Right. Exactly. Are you stopping at the Harbor Freight on your way to pick it up? If
are
that's
you
the case, then you're
fully upped on your AAA membership?
Yeah. How many miles of towing do you have available?
What insurance do you carry currently with you?
Well, with that, what are you guys looking forward to next year? What do you think? What models are right on the edge of sort of popping off, of becoming really big next year, do you think?
I think, Ivan and I were talking about this, and I've been saying this for a few months. As we all know, the TD5s are going to start.
Yeah, that's right.
Into the country. And I think there's going to be a lot of, people wanting them, but I also think there's going to be a lot of disappointment and, buying these first blocks. I would kind of stay away from the early TD5s.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people in this country are going to be so excited that, we're past these 300s and 200s. And everybody gets excited about a new kind of power plant. And, it's been a while since we've been able to import, something kind of fresh and new.
Yeah.
Because we only have the 300s for a little bit.
Yeah.
So once these TD5s start coming in, I think, the shops are going to have to be ready right off the bat, because I think a lot of them are going to be dumped because we all know that they're kind of a shitty,
especially the first few years.
Yes, exactly.
Bad.
So like the 10Ps, 11Ps, all these early blocks, and these people aren't going to be familiar with that. And I think a lot of people are going to be duped.
Yes.
Bring a Trailer is going to be flooded with them.
Yeah.
So
it'll be interesting to see how, the market, hopefully people are smart about it, but
I can't wait for the first Santana with a TD5 to be sold on Bring a Trailer for $150,000. It's going to be great. It'll be great.
Yeah.
Put my bid in now. I can't wait.
Put your bid in now.
Put your bids in now. Yeah, no, it's true. I agree, Dan. I'm interested in seeing what that does to the sort of Defender market. I think at this point, if you want a 300 TDI Defender, you've probably got it. There's been more than enough out there for long enough now that there really isn't a barrier. The cost isn't really that significant anymore, so far as, those things cost what they cost and they're available and you can get them. So I am interested to see. I know in Canada, that definitely happened 10 years ago when those cars first started coming into the country. It was all over the place. There were shops that had no idea how to work on them. There were cars that were parked for a year because they couldn't get the right parts for them, or somebody didn't know how to do, the fuel injection pumps on those things are a nightmare at a time. There were lots of cars that were, just melting because they mistimed the fuel injection pump. And if you do that, then the cylinder overheats to the point of just melting its lining right out, and really crazy stuff with those cars. And so, yeah, it was for the first, and now it's pretty commonplace. The TD5 is the kind of current state model in Canada. That's what everybody kind of has, and there's a few TDCI cars that are starting to come into Canada now. The early TDCI cars, which are also terrible. We'll get to the 2009 car. Well, technically this year. The 2009 car is it can be brought in, which is the peak Defender. From there, everything went downhill after 2009, and so they kind of, after the 300, they didn't get better. It wasn't an improvement. Put a bunch of more electronic shit in there, and it was all sort of all over the place. But they did have anti-stall, which is pretty fun. It's always fun to put your baby in your TD5 and just let it idle away into the woods or something. That's a fun video. That's a fun video to make. So yeah, well, that's cool. I'm looking forward to that as well. I think that'll be interesting. What do you think about it seems as though the L322 Range Rover has, people have kind of realized that, that might be the best one that they've ever made. And people seem to be looking for it a little more, being willing to pay a little bit more for it. Have you guys experienced that?
I mean, a little bit. I still think there's like this idea that all of the L322s are great.
Right.
And, I don't think everybody's educated yet on, I mean, obviously everybody hears about the timing chain issues and the 2010, 2011, like all that. But I still think people are paying too much for that Mark III versus like the Mark II, like the better, like the 07, 08.
I actually went through this because I had an 06, which was the 4.4 Jag, non-supercharged HSE.
Yeah.
And I think it was in June, I parked it on the street and some driver decided to not only take out mine, but another 6 cars on the block at the same time. So
that guy's a hero.
Mine was, I had it under classic car insurance. I had agreed value.
Right.
It wasn't very high.
Right.
But after the insurance company paid me, I went back to the market.
Right.
And it was impossible to find anything within reason.
Right.
Right. What I found was either extremely high mileage.
Right.
Or, what was in decent mileage was, people were asking upwards of 20, 25, which is something that over 6 years ago.
It's like crazy.
I paid like $8,000 for mine.
Yeah.
Now it's $15,000.
Right.
So,
yeah. And you think if you had to pick one, what's your favorite year of L322?
Personally, for me, I love my 06. I like my 08, but there's something about the 06 that just, it feels right. People don't really slightly see the body design change.
Yeah.
Although mine's super modified now, but like there's just something about the 06 that I just absolutely love. It has a little bit too much BMW internal DNA that I'm not crazy about, but I just live with it. Minor things like the key on the console versus the column, and there's just certain things that you deal with. But overall, it has over 200,000 miles. It's just, I love that truck. I just love it.
Yeah, it's interesting. 2008, 2009 seemed to be like, that was the best years for the factory. I don't know what was going on over there, but they were making good, really great cars. I guess just enough BMW washed out. I don't know, but they seem to be, that was peak Land Rovers coming out of the factory in 2008, 2009.
And it's ironic that it would be a peak Land Rover with a Jaguar engine.
Right. So what else are you guys looking at? What kind of vehicles do you think are going to really catch fire this year?
You keep on continuing to have like manual Mercedes, from the 90s, early, mid 80s. The C Coupe, the W124s, the W140s with manual gearboxes, things like that are just kind of odd. Yeah. Another one that I think actually has nothing to do with Land Rover. I think this year is the first year you can actually have an E38 with a 740 and a factory 6-speed gearbox. But it's a BMW. Right. That's an odd car that was available during 1999, 2000.
2000, yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I wonder, do you think as new cars, for all intents and purposes, with a very rare few outliers, are getting rid of the manual transmission, standard transmission, and going to some, variation of automatic transmission, is it pushing these what are otherwise, sedans or whatever kind of car that was available here, but never manual because, North America kind of turned its back on the standard transmission far before the rest of the world. Do you think that is causing this interest in either Japanese imports, European imports that are a car that you could have bought here, but that it does, like your P38, have a manual transmission, maybe has a slightly different engine spec? Do you think that, because there's no new cars at all that have manual transmissions and people, do kind of enjoy that they're going to not these very classic cars, but sort of, more recent cars, but now in a manual trim, in a European spec, if you will?
I definitely think it's helping because a lot of these cars from like the late 80s and early 90s are actually cars that if you live in a temperate climate and are somewhat mechanical inclined, you can actually daily drive it. I mean, you're going to daily drive, 60 miles each way or 100 miles a day. But if you have a short commute, very usable as a daily driver. And I think the driving experience is something that, you just can't get with anything else. And I think people are realizing that it's completely different, right? I mean, we know what it is to have an automatic disco. Well, it's kind of like a blob. If you put a manual in it, then it becomes a little bit more fun.
Yeah.
And the fact that, there are less and less manuals available. I mean, I think now the most recent one was the GTI is announcing that they're no longer going to do manuals from like 2026 on, which is a car that it has to be, that lived under manual gearboxes. It's like way of life. Then, but yeah, I think that definitely helps. I think just that it's different too. It just kind of makes a different experience.
Yeah.
And living in Chicago, there's no better kill switch than a manual gearbox and not getting carjacked.
Yeah.
That's right.
I actually had a 300 TDI Range Rover Classic, and clearly I wasn't on my best day. I left the key inside of the ignition and turned it off, went up to my apartment, and it's like 3 days later, I'm thinking, I can't find the key to this car. And, I looked up and down. I went to the garage. I came back. I can't find the key. Finally, I'm like, well, let me check in the ignition for 3 entire days. I'm sure somebody had to see that with ill intention. We're like, oh, wait, I don't know how to drive
know how to drive this. Yeah, I don't ever take the keys out of, any of the Series 1s or anything. Because I would lose them. They just stay in the car. I was driving with my dad last weekend. He's like, don't leave the keys in the car. So no. If somebody can drive that away, they deserve it. Like they can, it's like pulling the sword out of the stone or picking up Thor's hammer or something. Then it's yours now. You go enjoy it.
I kind of had a sad story about P38 that I used to have. One time I drove this P38 and I parked it in kind of a little bit of a bad area, and I forgot and I left the window down and the keys inside of it. And when I came back an hour later, there was another P38 parked next to it.
And did they also leave the window down?
Yeah, they left the window down. The keys
left you the keys. Yeah.
What a day.
Yeah, they were like, this guy's a glutton for punishment. He needs another one of these.
He needs another one, yeah.
No, that's not true. I've never had a P38, but it's just funny to think.
It's only a matter of time. Well, like I said, it is definitely something that we should be doing more often. The market is always an interesting thing to talk about. And Dan and Ivan, it is always an absolute pleasure to talk to both of you. You guys are fantastic, and we love listening to your show and love all the shenanigans that you guys are up to as well. And we do have to, at some point, do an in-person collaboration of some kind, as the world of content creators is required to do a certain amount of collaborations now. We'll have to figure something out. We'll have to maybe find a shitty old car and drive it cross country or something. We'll see. We'll figure something out.
I think we should definitely do that.
All right. Well, boys, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I will talk to you again hopefully very soon. Good luck out there. Good luck with the sales and purchases and everything else this year, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you. All right.
Thanks.
All right. Well, hey, it is always great to talk to those two. I really love those guys. They are a ton of fun.
Gluttons for punishment, bidding on a Freelander.
Yeah. I know Dan and I have
a good way to end up with a Freelander.
It is a good way to end up with a Freelander. You could sometimes
you can't cure that with antibiotics. I'll tell you that.
No, you sure can. And often you're the only person bidding on a Freelander. That's not a lot of people. Yeah, Dan and I have very similar tastes when it comes to like stupid Land Rover purchases. So I really love that. I like chatting with Dan. He has a real appreciation for the real weird, special one-off and two-off and specialty preparation folks. And and hey, I agree with Ivan. I think that a half-track Land Rover may be one of the most interesting. I really now want to see one turn. I want to try to turn one, Let's just try to drive it through a Starbucks drive-through. Let's see what happens.
It's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah,
not going to turn. It's not going to turn.
Just
go straight. Only go straight.
Just go straight through the drive-through. You can only go through straight through drive-throughs in your half-track Land Rover. But there you go. I've been talking about being at the Dunsfold Collection. Reminded me that we have to get on to our bathroom sponsorship of the Dunsfold Collection. You really have to get onto that with Phil.
The toilet paper has little Stevens.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, printed on each square. I like that. I think that's a good idea. Ivan had mentioned a cardboard cutout of you with a whiteboard message bubble, and people can just write, whatever they're thinking at the time. I think that would be great. There's an unlimited amount of opportunity there, I think. We really have to get on that. So speaking of getting on that, and if you haven't either listened to the Rovertalk podcast with Ivan and our very good friend Phil Bashel, they're actually there at the Dunsfold Collection, or seen our video at the Dunsfold Collection with Phil when Liza and I were there visiting him, head on over to either of those places and listen and or watch those. And if you haven't yet been to our YouTube channel to watch what is, I think, one of the greatest sporting feats of 2023, Ike and I's competition in the Defender Trophy 2023, that video is now live. And let me tell you, it is Iron Man meets American Gladiator meets Naked and Afraid. Ooh. It is, it's good stuff. It's good stuff, Yeah. A little spicy.
Quality content, and half the price. So like and subscribe if you're there. Yeah. Check out our online store, The Underpowered Hour. Get yourself a tiny Ike keychain or a decal to put on your favorite Land Rover. That's or on the toolbox. Get one for the toolbox.
Yeah. Get one for the toolbox. Yeah, if you don't have a tiny Ike on your toolbox, it's a safety hazard. I think tiny Ike is like a little safety supervisor, just making sure you're putting on that eye protection or whatever else. I don't know. Not taping drill bits together, whatever other stupid thing you're doing. Tiny Ike is there to remind you, be safe.
Yeah,
safety third.
It's a cautionary tale. Just look at me and you'll remember. I really need to be more careful here. I'm going to end up like that guy.
We want to end up like that guy. Yeah. All right. Well, it's been a slice as always. Looking very forward to having you and Linus regale us with tales of the winter breakdown out there in the desert.
Oh my gosh, it's going to be a good one. There was some hair-raising activities that happened. There was some chases, there was some escapes, there was some very, very tenuous situations that required a lot of concentration and care to extract ourselves from. We visited a lot of remote places, and it's going to be a good one. We had a lot of fun, but there were some trying times. I'm not going to lie. And there were some rescues. There was some tears shed. There was some blood spilled. There was some late nights. There was some wrenching. There was a lot of things that happened. It was an emotional roller coaster.
Who would have ever thought with a Dormobile that Linus had purchased all but 2 weeks before?
Yeah. Oh, he purchased it 2 weeks before, but he had only had it for 4 days before we left on a trip. So that was a special thing. And then we also took a 75-year-old Land Rover that hadn't been driven in a year. So that was also good. That was our main vehicle, our main transportation source. So, it's a recipe for sadness, but in the end, we triumphed. So we're here, and we're going to talk about that real soon.
Premiere content. So look forward to that. And Ike, as always, it's been a slice, and we'll talk to you next week.
All right. See you then.
The Underpowered Hour is produced by Liza Barris, Ike Goss, and me, Steve Barris. Pavel Svardov composed and performed our theme music. Consider supporting the show on Patreon, and if you already do, thank you. Your support makes the show possible. For even more, check out our Instagram or Facebook.